So Microsoft Fabric is basically a software as a service tool by Microsoft, which is a one-stop shop for everything, right from data movement to data transformation, data storage, data science, real-time intelligence, and business intelligence as well. So it's an end-to-end analytics and data platform designed for enterprises that require a unified solution. Now, so those who are familiar with Azure Synapse Analytics, one can consider Microsoft Fabric as a software as a service version of that with much more advanced features and functionalities that have been released across. Simple example is Copilot. Then we discussed about the basic understanding. When we said Microsoft Fabric is a software as a service, what do we mean by software as a service and other cloud services? So software as a service is basically a cloud-based software that can be accessed via internet. So the users or the customers need not manage the infrastructure or platform, but just use the application as it is. So in that pizza as a service terminology, it is that I'm going and dining out. Infrastructure as a service is basically the cloud provider provides us with a virtualized computing resources like server, storage, and networking. We need not take care of the maintenance, the data center, the cooling aspect, unlike on-premises. Hence, we get a virtualized server. The physical server is maintained by the cloud service provider themselves. So the customers or the consumers manage the operating system, apps, and runtime that is running on within the server. So in our equivalent aspect, it is take and bake aspect, wherein we take the pizza dough and then bake it and dine ourselves. In case of platform as a service, the cloud vendor provides us a platform to develop, run, and manage the applications without having the need to deal with the underlying infrastructure. So the developers can focus on the code and the provider manages the servers and the operating system. So it's like the pizza is delivered to you at your home and then you lay it out for yourself and dine it. Hence, software as a service is more for the end users. Platform as a service is majorly for the software developers. And in case of infrastructure as a service, you need network architect, IT administrators to manage and maintenance of the servers, the virtualized servers. Then we went across the core concepts in Microsoft Azure, that is tenant. A tenant is basically, one can state that it's a digital representation of an organization or a consumer that uses the Microsoft Cloud services. So that uses the Microsoft Cloud services. Now, subscription is basically a logical container into which the resources and services can be managed, configured, and installed. In the hierarchical aspect, we saw that a single user can have a single user, meaning a single customer, an organization, or an identity can have multiple tenants. One tenant can host multiple subscriptions. And a subscription can be moved from one tenant to another tenant, assuming that the subscription that is governed via the account has access across both the tenants, the source tenant, the original tenant, and the destination tenant in which we want to move across. So this covered couple of core concepts of what we discussed across yesterday. So now, and then we saw across what Microsoft Entra ID is, or what was formerly termed as Azure Active Directory. So Microsoft one can state that Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Entra ID is basically a catalog of users, groups, devices, and applications. And that's what we will take a look into today. So now, once we go into the Microsoft Entra ID in the Azure homepage, first aspect is let's go across the concept of users. What do we mean by users? As an organization, I can have multiple users within my organization. Correct? Like in my startup DataShark, I am not the only employee. There might be some other employees as well. So the domain, if you all remember the concept of domain, by default, whenever you create a tenant, a default domain name is associated. So I got a default domain name as YLDF7. I can rename the tenant name as well. It's not a read only, unlike tenant ID, which is globally unique. Hence, it is a read only aspect. So in case, but by default, whenever a tenant name is created, I can rename the tenant name. But I can even buy multiple custom domain names that can map my organization proper conceptual aspects. That's what we had stated yesterday. Now let's take a look across what do I exactly mean by that. Now let's state that a new employee joins my organization. Correct? So for that new employee, I need to create an email ID for that corresponding user. Correct? I cannot add his external accounts like his Gmail, his personal accounts cannot be, should not be added. It can be added, but it should not be added as your proper aspect. Correct? Because then he would be sending emails via that account, which might not state my organization's domain aspect. And that will take a look in couple of minutes. Correct? Hence, whenever any employee joins an organization, a new user needs to be created for that employee. So for that, there is an option to create a new user. Now here you can see, correct? There's an option to create a new user and to invite external user. Let's deep dive into new user initially and then take a look with respect to the concept of external user. So for that, let me start with the new user. Now let's say that I want to create a new user with the name test user 1. Can you see the aspect? It's stating that the user ID would be created as test user 1 underscore yldf7.onmicrosoft.com. So whatever the initial tenant name got created, that becomes the default domain name. Even if I update the tenant name, the users would by default be created with @yldf7.onmicrosoft.com only. Can anyone state why? Why cannot I change this? Why cannot I edit this to the I was able to update the tenant name, correct? So why can't I have the same tenant name here as well? Any
Is
thoughts?
this coming from that custom domain name that you explained yesterday?
Because that is your default.
No, but that is only active because the other one, if we don't buy a personal one.
Correct. Shweta, that was not my question. My question was different. Correct. Okay, let me take one step back. So basically, can you see this pick list? As of now, I am able to see only one drop down. It is because under my tenant, I have only one domain. What I mean by that is,
You had created nandan.com also, right, yesterday?
but I had not bought that.
Correct.
That is the paid
why.
services. Okay.
Yeah, so the
So
default
it's
one that is there. Okay. So, but this is coming from the domain name, right? Not from the tenant name.
correct. But okay, let me go back one step and try to ask. So one tenant can have multiple domain names, but by default, one becomes available that is equivalent to the original tenant name .onmicrosoft.com. Correct. Now, in case if I want some domain names, I can buy it. If you see, though I have created nandan.com, it's in unverified status because I have not bought that up till now. Until unless you purchase it, that won't be in the available state itself. Correct? So it is because of that when I'm creating a new user, I'm only able to see one. So this pick list is basically the pick list of all the available values in this custom domain name. Any queries up till now? Okay.
Oh,
Now my question was, since as of now I am having only one available domain name, hence there is only one drop down. But can you see the difference? Whenever it is the default tenant name, that is YLDF7 on Microsoft.com comes in. So the user email ID would be testuser1@yldf7.onmicrosoft.com. Correct. So this might lead to some spam emails as well, meaning that might go into junk or default email. Similar to the team meeting invite that you all got, correct? It had nandanhegde.datasharksedu.onmicrosoft.com because the datasharks.onmicrosoft.datasharks.edu was the tenant name, and because I had bought that tenant name while creating this purchasing this subscription, but on Microsoft.com came in. So there is still a Microsoft tag within the email ID. So in case if you want to get rid of on Microsoft.com and have a common organization name like datasharks.com, etc., then there is a need with respect to having such custom domains. But my question was, if you all remember, I had updated the tenant name. I was able to update the tenant name from YLDF7 to, let's say, DataSharks, correct? In the tenant properties. Then why am I not able to have here datasharks.onmicrosoft.com? Any
It's taking
guesses?
the domain name, but not the tenant name, whatever we give.
Why? Why would that be the case? It is because
Will it depend on the subscription or no?
this is like an email ID, correct? Shouldn't email IDs be unique? Correct.
Yeah.
The user principal name can be duplicated because I can be Nandan Hegde, someone else can be Nandan Hegde, correct? But the domain name should be unique, meaning the @ aspect should be unique, correct? Imagine that if I have datasharks.onmicrosoft.com and someone else is also rename their domain name to datasharks.onmicrosoft.com, then there can be instance of two users having the same email ID.
Yeah, I got it. Because you were saying yesterday you had informed that we had discussed basically that tenant name can be a duplicate. So this will become a duplicate.
Correct. Hence, the domain name that is created cannot be updated. The default domain name that gets created cannot be updated, unlike the tenant name. So I hope you all understood the difference between renaming the tenant name and not being able to rename the default domain name. Correct? Any queries?
And then anyway, it is taking the domain name only, right? So domain names will always be unique, right? There
Correct.
it will never be tenant name at the
But
rate.
correct. But by default, when you purchase a subscription, the
It takes
tenant
the tenant name.
name and the default tenant name domain gets associated with you.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
even though you are able to update the default tenant name as per whatever convenience you have, you do not have the authority to rename the default domain name, or it does not get auto updated, because domain name similar to tenant ID has to be unique throughout globally, because you would be sending emails or receiving messages. Unlike tenant properties, wherein tenant name is specific to your organization itself, it won't impact others. That's the point that I'm trying to make. I hope this is clear to you all. Any
So
queries?
domain name
Nandan,
is like unique, like our email IDs.
Correct.
Okay.
So once no one can now buy nandan.com, assuming I have bought it. Now anyone can buy because it's in an unverified state.
Okay, so tenant name is a display name that can be duplicate, but domain name it cannot be duplicate. That will be like default assigned by Microsoft.
It's not specific to Microsoft because, as I said, correct.
If you buy it, you can select that also, Pallavi.
Like I cannot use gmail.com. Correct. The domain name is unique globally throughout. It's not specific to the organization because you are sending emails. Correct.
Okay.
Nandan, if you want to get nandan.com, how to do that? I mean, for
You have to
example,
buy.
test user.
So for that, it's add custom domain. You have to follow a process wherein you go across and request it. So that's a separate licensing and other aspects.
Okay.
Correct. So now, since I have only one available domain, correct. So for that, I'm only able to see one drop down. Now I can provide the corresponding display name that needs to be used for that user. So test user 1.
Nandan, one more question. If you want to change your YLDF to YLDF9, will it change to YLDF9 on Microsoft.com?
No, Keshav, that's the aspect that I stated, correct? It's the default domain, it cannot be updated.
Okay.
Because once it is provided, it would remain unique, because Microsoft might have provided YLDF9 to someone else, correct?
Okay.
Once the subscription got created, you cannot have duplicate email IDs. Hence,
Okay.
though the tenant display name can be updated, the domain default name cannot be updated. And once a domain is bought, you cannot purchase it. Hence, you might have seen an example with respect to the Jio Hotstar or something, correct? Wherein there was a fight wherein someone had bought the domain name, correct? And they were trying to take it from the Reliance were trying to buy back, because domain name stays unique globally. It cannot be specific to an organization or anything, duplicate between organization. Then for the new user, you can provide an auto-generated password, or you can explicitly provide the password that you want to provide it to him, correct? As per the standards, every organization can have certain standards, correct? So you can provide a password that can be provided. And then in certain cases, what happens is, I know a user might join the organization in 5 days. So I can have his account created, but in disabled state, correct? But in certain cases, I can already have it pre-enabled, similar to how I am having it now. So in this case, since I want that user to be active now itself, I'll have this account enabled, correct? Then next properties. Then these are certain other attributes that you need to provide, correct? And these are not mandatory. So for now, you can ignore this. Now, these attributes are basically for some automation aspects within the Active Directory itself that you take a look in some couple of minutes. But do remember that there are certain properties that you can add for the employees, like his joining date, his ID, department, company name, etc., or the job titles, his contact address, email address, etc., all his details like his personal email address, etc. Post that, assignments. What do we mean by assignments? I'll come to that tomorrow. Today, let's focus on user and let's revert back on this concept of assignments tomorrow. So, assignments are basically with respect to provisioning of certain access to that user. Let's go with that concept, that to provide access to the users within the subscription or within the parts of the subscription, you have assignments. We'll take a look tomorrow once we deep dive into the concept of roles and access control. And then review and create. So this create option. So once I click on the create option, the user gets created. Let me refresh the page now. What was the name? Test user 1 to be deleted. Now if you see, he was associated with this email ID. So now the user can log in or send emails via this email ID. Hence, but as you all can see, yldf7.onmicrosoft.com came in. But in case if I would have bought a custom domain like datasharks.com, the username would have been testuser1@datasharks.com, giving a proper authenticity of an organization account, unlike onmicrosoft.com. Hence, organizations do buy custom domains to get rid of this onmicrosoft.com aspect in between. But since for us, we are developers and sandbox, we do not care whether it is on Microsoft.com. For us, it works out. Do remember how we created a new user, because the user via which you are already logging in is like an admin account. We also need another user to do multiple development and understanding the security and governance concept. So tomorrow, once I explain you all the concept of the role assignment, I'll again demo on creating a new user. At that time, I'll explain the adding the role assignment aspect as well. And I expect you all to create a user for yourself, because that would be needed for our experimental aspects in coming sessions. So for now, I'll go ahead and delete this user since I do not need this. So this is with respect to a new user. Now, what all properties are available within the user, that we would take a look. So this is my email account, that is datasharks@yldf7. Now if I click on this, this gives me all the details, like this account is part of 7 groups, the aspect that we'll discuss later. It has around 2 roles and it is of a type member. The account is at an enable state and it has 2 licenses. So now let's take a look with respect to the properties. I can even edit properties since I'm the overall admin of the tenant. Now imagine that you might have forgotten your password, correct? So at that time, we reach out to the administrator. What they usually do is they go and reset your password and provide the updated password to you all, so that then you all can update the reset password again. Now, imagine that if an employee is leaving the organization, does it make sense to keep his account active? No, correct? Because imagine that if he uses that account @ or domain.name.com after he leaves the organization and starts sending emails from that organizational account to some other users, some negative comments about the organization, that would create a bad reputation for the organization. Or in case if he or she still has some access, that would still he or she would still be able to access it. Hence, the moment someone leaves the organization, the first aspect is we need to disable that account. That's what the administrators do, the Active Directory administrators. Now, why am I discussing these all concepts as a part of Microsoft Fabric? Because in Microsoft Fabric, as I said, is an end-to-end platform. Correct? There comes a discussion wherein you do need to have certain security aspects. You do need to share data with some external users as well. External users meaning non-organizational users. So until and unless you understand the bifurcation between the users, you won't be able to understand those in-depth concepts. So up till now we saw how I can reset a password, how I can disable it. But there are some other aspects like logs or the sign-in logs. This shows me that what all changes I have been making with respect to the logging via this account. So you recently saw that I created a new user called test user 1 and I also deleted that user. So all those logs do come in. When I validated the password, it is basically the MFA authentication that I did. Sign-in logs. Sign-in logs do show me from which IP address I have logged in. Correct? So it shows me that every time my sign-in was successful, the IP address via which I'm logging in that account, the location, and whether MFA has been enabled or not. Now, why is this critical? Imagine that suddenly there are so many multiple sign-in failures. It means someone is trying to hack that account. There might be a probability, correct? Or it can be you adding a wrong password multiple times. So as an organizational security aspect, I can set up an alert stating that in case if for an account, if there are more than 5 sign-in error codes within a span of 5 minutes, it means someone is trying to hack that account. I can instantly disable that account so that no one can misuse my or the user's organizational account. So these are the logs via which such security governance can be considered at the Active Directory level. Now, this is not a call for Active Directory concept, but now I'll come to the major aspect here. Can you see here there are 3 main aspects, that is assigned roles, groups, and licenses. These are the 3 aspects that you take a look. First is for certain aspects, like you all might have heard for Power BI. Those who do not know, anyhow we'll discuss once we discuss Microsoft Fabric with respect to licensing. But as an organization or as a user to use Outlook or to use Microsoft Copilot experiences, to use certain Power BI aspect, you do need licenses. Correct? So whether a user is associated with a license or not, and what license is the user associated with, I can go to the user aspect and check in the license section. Here, I can see that my account has 2 licenses. One is Microsoft Fabric Free and then is Microsoft Power Apps for Developer. Now, as an organization, how and where to grant the licenses? It's in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So once I log into Microsoft 365 Admin Center, as an organization, I might have bought a fixed set of licenses. Correct? As you all can see, my YLDF7 organization as of today has these many available Microsoft Fabric free licenses and these many Microsoft Power App for Developer licenses. Now I can assign these licenses to the active users. How? So for that, I have to go to Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Under active users, now you can see, correct, Alex Wilbur is unlicensed as of now. These set of users are having these licenses, but Alex Wilbur is unlicensed. In case if I have to provide him Microsoft Fabric free license, then I have to click on that user. Then under licenses and apps, I can select which location I want to grant that user the license. And then I can select, I need to associate that user with Microsoft Fabric free license and save on the changes. So Alex Wilbur has now been associated with the Microsoft Fabric free license. This is the licensing aspect that is also governed by the Active Directory team. And why do we need? Go
This
ahead.
is a different portal, right? So like when we created our subscription, like this is not governed by that subscription, right? This M365 is completely different, right? Like if we go today,
No,
then
this, yes, you all can go. This, see, these are generic Microsoft sites, correct? When you bought a subscription, it means you bought a tenant for yourself. Agree? Within tenant, you have users. Those users can, similar to how you are logged into my.visualstudio.com, correct? That's a generic Microsoft site. Correct? Similarly, via the account that is associated with the tenant, you can log into portal.azure.com, admin.microsoft.com, app.powerbi.com. These are generic sites. Now, when you log into admin.microsoft.com, it would default, when you log into admin.microsoft.com via the account, it would log into the default tenant that it is associated with. Hence,
okay, but if I don't have a subscription, okay, then I will not be able to log in here, right? It is
no,
associated, right, with the tenant.
no. You can still log in, correct? Because, see, as I said, even if you do not have a subscription is a paid aspect, correct? Let's take let's reverse track, correct? Imagine you took a free subscription, the active as subscription, correct? The subscription expired in a span of 30 days, but the tenant is still active, correct? If the tenant is active, meaning the users are still active, the licensing is still active. It's just that your Azure credits got suspended, but your other licenses that might be part of that tenant, in case if they are still active. Licensing are different, Azure credits are different, correct? So did you still govern that tenant so that user can still log into these generic sites like admin.microsoft.com, app.powerbi.com, portal.azure.com.
But tenant is still needed, right, for the first time. See, when I took the free subscription for the first time, that time my tenant got created. Till that time, I did not have a tenant. Until I do that at least once, I cannot do anything here, right?
Meaning you won't be able to log in. Why? Because you do not have an account.
Correct.
But let me take one step back. If you bought a subscription, does not mean you get a tenant. If you, You do not have to buy a subscription only to get a tenant. You can buy a tenant as well, specifically, just a tenant.
Okay.
If you all
Okay.
remember, in the prerequisite documentation, I had suggested 2 steps. One was
Yeah.
activate your free Azure subscription. Since you activated your free Azure subscription, you got a tenant. But there was another aspect of E365 enterprise subscription. So it's like a licensing aspect. Correct. So if you buy a license, correct, or let's consider that currently you all have joined the Microsoft Teams channel here, the Teams call, correct? Via, do you have Microsoft Team licenses? No, correct?
No. Mhm.
It's a free account via which you are joining this call, correct? But imagine that if you have to purchase a Microsoft Team license for your account, correct? That's also one of the business that you are doing with Microsoft, correct? Whenever you do a business with Microsoft, a digital representation is created for your account. A tenant gets created. So hence, to explain that concept, I had asked for that E365 aspect, if that is possible for you all. But now I hope the concept is clear. Just because you are activating a subscription does not mean that's the only way to get a tenant. Any purchase or transaction that you do with Microsoft would associate you with a tenant. And in case if you have a tenant, you can have users within that tenant. If you have users within that tenant, they can go and log into any of the sites of Microsoft via that account. And in case if they have the necessary access, then they would be able to see all the data, else they would be only able to see certain aspects only. Because as the name suggests here, this is admin.microsoft.com, correct? Here I'm able to associate licenses and other aspects to the users. I can even revoke his license. Should all the users within the organization have that level of access? No, correct? Because this is an admin aspect. So for that, the concept of roles and assignments that I said, correct, in the user aspect that I'll discuss later, that comes in. But in layman terminology, since this account is global admin across the entire tenant, it is able to have all this access. I hope this concept is clear now.
Okay, one more question. Here you have logged in with Nandan Hegde, right? On this admin portal.
Not Nandan
Is it?
Hegde, Data
Oh,
Shah.
it's Data Shah. Yeah, that was my confusion. Okay.
Nandan
That is
Hegde
one more thing. And
username, the first name and the last name that I had provided, but
got
it's
it,
still
got it.
this account.
Still the same account. Now, when the organization buys licenses, okay, that license gets associated with the tenant.
Correct.
Okay.
And that aspect I'll discuss in couple of minutes once we discuss the external user concept. Hold on to that.
Okay.
Correct?
Okay,
A good
yeah.
question, but hold on to that. That I'll discuss later. So team, any queries up till now? Okay.
None.
So the admin center is where I can associate and grant a license. Now, why I am stating this aspect? Because in case if your tenant, and there is a 99% probability that you all won't have the Microsoft Fabric free license, correct? Because as per the latest change, because of the so-called misuse that users are doing, what Microsoft has done is, until and unless a new tenant is, I don't remember the exact date, it's 30 or 90 days old, Microsoft Fabric free trial licenses cannot be associated for users in that. But in certain cases that can be granted, and that's what we can take a look across. Hence, I wanted to explain you all the concept of the licensing. Because imagine that after 90 days, if that free trial license concept does become enabled at your tenant, you all can associate your accounts licenses, the free Microsoft Fabric free licenses to that account via this aspect. So for that, I'm explaining you all this concept of licensing. Then comes something called as groups. Groups are like logical grouping of multiple users for some similar aspects. That's what we'll discuss the next aspect post the user concept of what groups is. But under the user section, under groups property, I can take a look as to in which all groups that user is present. And finally, with respect to assigned roles, so, and Azure role assignments. So in Azure role assignments, I can take a look as to what all role does this user have in my current Active Directory. So you all can see that this user is having global administrator, meaning I can manage all aspects of Microsoft Active Directory and services that uses it. And I am a Power Platform administrator as well. This is the role and assignment that we were discussing while creating the user. We'll take a look into this roles in detail in tomorrow's session. But for now, these are the different roles that the corresponding user is associated with. So these are the three main aspects that you all need with respect to Microsoft Fabric or Azure. In user, you want to check whether he or she has the necessary licenses, which all groups he or she is a part of, and what roles does he or she have.
What is the difference between assigned roles and Azure role assignments?
Assigned roles are basically with respect to
access privilege, right? Assigned role means the access privilege, you mean, Nandan?
correct. So basically what no, assigned role can be with respect to different granular assignments. Azure role assignments are default Azure major assignments. I can provide this some custom roles as well. I'll discuss that once we discuss tomorrow on the concept of roles and assignments and access polish tomorrow. So Shweta, do keep a note of that. Correct? Because that's a separate I'll say that would take me around half an hour to explain those. There are custom roles as well that can be defined, and that's what we'll take a look tomorrow. So these are the properties of the users. Now, up till now, we saw how to create a new user within the organization. But now let's take an example that some of the major organization acquired my organization. Correct? There is a larger training organization and I'm just a startup now. Correct? They acquired my startup. So at that time, I cannot create instantly all the user accounts here because imagine or vice versa. Correct? Let's take an example that the organization that bought my organization can't keep on creating, let's say my organization has 200 users. Correct? It does not make sense to instantly create 200 users. Correct? But what they can do is they can invite those 200 users email account into the new tenant, new organization. Or the other way around. Let's state that within the DataSharks organization, since now I am doing business, correct? Let's state that I also work into consultancy now. Some business user wants to have some sandbox environment, but he does not want a new user because he has multiple email IDs He does not want a new email ID to be created, because a new email ID meaning new maintenance, new password, etc. He does not want to bother with that. He wants to use his existing email ID itself, let's say @gmail.com, to be used for within my Azure or within my tenant. How is that possible? So for that, there is a concept of inviting external users. Now, here when you see, check the user type. The user type is member. Correct? Now, I can invite an external user. So now let's say that I want to invite datasharks15@gmail.com user. I would provide a username as, display name as external user, data sharks. Correct? I'll send him an invite message. Please join this demo. Now I can keep CC recipient. Correct? And can you see there's an invite redirect URL? Let's understand what these aspects are. Correct? Now in next properties, similar to other properties that I had while creating the user. Correct? But can you see here the user type is by default guest. But I can explicitly make him member as well. So what does this user type here indicate? So basically members, and there are certain properties, default properties that can be set at a tenant level, wherein users whose user type is member would have entire access, entire read access or some access, default access across the entire tenant. But for guest users, that access can be limited. That's the default property that can be set. Let's take an example. Correct? Do you want the guest users to have access to the entire users within the Active Directory? No, correct, because they might reach out to someone else by getting their email ID. That's what I do not want. I do not want them to explore the users beyond their scope of point of contact whom I have provided. Correct? So, depending on the user type, if it is guest, some default restrictions can be set up at an organization level. But in this case, I want the external user that I'm adding to have complete access similar to actual resources within the organization, because I got acquired. So acquired meaning eventually they also would be part of the entire organization itself. Correct? So it does not make sense to add them as guest. But in case if they would have been contractors, then adding them as guest account would have made sense. But since this is a case of acquisition, though it's an external user, he or she needs to have a full access of member. Then you can provide other details. Assignments, I'll discuss, as I said, I'll discuss tomorrow, the roles and the groups. Then
just one question, Nandan. This particular feature that we have in wherein we are doing a guest account, is that how we give Accenture access on Avanar tenant?
yes.
Okay.
So now the email, this is the email, correct? This is the invite redirect URL, and then I'll invite. So a user invitation is in progress now. Correct? So the user has been successfully invited. Now, let me filter this out. Let me refresh this. Can you see external user data sharks? Correct? This is the email. But can you see the user principal name that got created? here. So @yldf7.onmicrosoft.com is the domain name. But the username for that is the account. My account was datasharks15 @gmail.com. But there cannot be more than 2 @ in a single email ID. So the @ gets replaced with an underscore. So datasharks15 _gmail.com. Then hash external hash gets added. So this aspect states that this is an external user. So imagine that I want to identify who all have been invited externally rather than actually user being created. Is user type the filter aspect? No, because you all saw, correct? Even for external users, I can make them as member type. So the way to identify whether a user has been externally added or not is through this concept. If the user principal name has external hash. That's another way as well. I'll come to that. Now, in case if I click on this user, I can see that the invitation state is pending acceptance. The user, the external user, has still not accepted the invitation. Any queries up till now?
This user principal is whatever gets created, right? I mean, that is fixed, right? Like based on the domain, like _gmail.com, that no one can change, right?
No,
He needs to log in once to confirm his.
correct. Because see, if as a user, imagine if I have a tenant, correct? If I know your Gmail ID, I can start adding you all, correct? And start creating spam. That's not how it works, correct? The user has to accept it for him or her to be part of that tenant. Else, what hackers can do is I can send an email to, I can invite you all, and then I can start spamming you all with certain my advertisements, etc. Correct? So one has to formally accept this invitation. So this is my email ID, that is datasharks15 @gmail.com. Correct? So I got an invitation. I have to click on this accept invitation, post which the user would become active in this tenant. Now a catch. Does all the accounts have email ID enabled? No, correct? There can be some organizations or some accounts on which they have disabled email. If that is the case, the one way is for the user to accept that via the email invite that went across. Correct? Which is this. And the message that I had sent, please join this demo. That message came in. Since this user has email configured, I got this email invitation. But imagine if the user has no email enabled. How to send an invite to him? So for that, then the redirect URL that came in, correct? That comes in handy. Meaning, so for that, I'll click on resend the invitation. So once I click on resend the invitation, a redemption URL comes in. Correct? I need to copy that URL. Now I need to provide that URL to that user manually. Correct? So what I'll do is now, if you see, another email got sent because I resent the invitation. But now I'll provide him or her the redemption URL that I copied. Now that can be provided to the URL, correct? This is the authentication code, not with respect to the redemption aspect, correct? So it's the authentication code that it would send for me to log in via my account, the Data Sharks, correct? So for now, I'll accept this invitation since I need to provide some code here. So I won't be sharing that.
And then, but for signing for that code also, that person needs that email ID to be enabled,
No.
right? Otherwise, he will
No,
not
no, no,
get
no.
that.
The codes, not every email, not every account has email, correct? It has mobile number associated, MFA associated, correct? So it's via
Okay.
MFA that I'll be signing in, not via my email sign in.
Okay, okay.
Clear? I hope that is clear.
Yes. Okay.
Correct? So these are the different aspects, correct, that one has to be clear with while inviting the users, correct? For now, once the invitation is sent, for now I'll delete this user, correct? Because I don't want personal accounts to be added here. But now let's take a look with respect to some other external accounts that I have, like my Gmail account, correct? If you see, this is an external account, correct? @gmail.com. So if I click here, since I had already accepted this, it would show that the invitation has been accepted. And now I am a member because I have assigned it as a member type. I can even edit the property. So this is how you invite external users within the organization. Any queries up till now? Before I move to the licensing of these external users. Okay. Now imagine that my Gmail account, correct, is part of, let's say, tenant Gmail. It's a part of Gmail tenant, correct? Now within the Gmail tenant, this account had a Power BI license, correct? Now, if I invited the Gmail account into my YLDF7 tenant, correct? Would the license associated with that account also get inherited? Or let me take another example, correct? YLDF7 account, sorry, this Data Sharks @YLDF7 account is part of 3 tenants, correct? YLDF7, Data Sharks, and default directory. Agree? And we all saw that the YLDF7 user has a Power BI free license and a Power Apps developer license. Correct? Now, if the user is having license in this tenant, if he's invited into some external tenant, does it mean that that license would also get inherited across all the tenants?
No,
No.
should not.
No. Okay, who all are stating no? Can you all raise your hands? Okay. So it means others are of the opinion, yes, correct. The license would get inherited. At least yes or no bolo so that I'll understand how you all are thinking, correct. I understood. No, folks. Okay. So the answer to that is no, it won't get inherited because tenant, a couple of minutes back, someone had asked, correct, how are licenses purchased? So licenses are purchased at the tenant level. And then if you saw here, correct, it is in this tenant that I'm logged in now. And within this tenant, I have this set of licenses available. So the licenses that I have purchased here are at this tenant level. And then I can associate these licenses to the accounts within this tenant itself. So in case if my account, let me move to switch over to the Data Sharks aspect here. I might not be able to switch in because I do not have MFA configured. Okay, unfortunately, I won't be able to switch because I recently switched my mobile. I do not have MFA configured. But when I say that licenses are not inherited, trust me on that, because tenants, licenses are purchased at a tenant level. Imagine that I have a license on my personal account or an organizational account, correct? But in my organization, there are certain limitation restrictions, like I cannot go to admin roles. I create my own tenant, correct? Wherein I am the complete admin. And I invite my organizational account as a user within my personal tenant. In case if licenses would get inherited in my new tenant as well, correct? Automatically everyone would start using the same account everywhere, correct? Microsoft won't have business done with that, and that might make some security and cost issues as well, correct? Hence, licenses are at tenant level itself. So in case if the external user had license in his original tenant, and if he's invited as a user within the new tenant, I have to explicitly grant that user licenses within this tenant as well. So that's the second aspect with respect to licensing. Any queries? Okay.
I can I ask a complex question, as in when is I'll give you the example again from Accenture to Avanade, like when we were doing the
Anamika, can we keep those organizational related questions separate? We can discuss that personally. Let's not discuss any organizational internal aspects in this calls for other users.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah, fine.
We can connect externally to discuss on that.
Okay.
Okay. So other than that, is there any other question?
No.
Okay. Okay. So we discussed with respect to the licensing aspect, and we discussed different types of users, correct? Remember, once I explain the roles and assignments tomorrow, I want you all to set up 2 users for yourself. One is 3 users to be more specific, correct? One is you need to create 2 users, 2 new users within your tenant. And how would we bifurcate? We would give them different roles and assignments. And third is you need to invite an external user, because those 4 users, that is 3 new users and 1 main user, these would be the 4 users that we would be spinning across in our practical demos, correct? So post tomorrow's call, I expect you all.
Sorry, Nandan, can you just repeat, like 3 users with different roles and assignments and 1 guest user, you said?
No. See, 1 user is already the one that you would be logging in, the admin role, correct?
Okay.
Post that, you would be creating, I'll be asking you all to create 2 new users and 1 external user. So overall, there would be 4 users that we would be shuffling across in next 1.5 months to understand different data governance, security, and other aspects.
2 new users, 1 external, right? Not guest.
1 external user, a guest user itself.
When guest and external.
External user with type as guest.
Okay.
User type as guest. Clear?
Yes.
Anyhow, I'll explain tomorrow. I'll remind tomorrow again what roles and assignments once we discuss on the roles and assignments. So now we understood the concept of users. See, these are not Microsoft Fabric. These are the base on which your security and other aspects would happen. So this entire 1.5 week would remain on this base core concepts of Azure Active Directory itself. So do have patience on that. Next is with respect to the groups. As I said, groups are logical aggregation of users into a single aspect. Meaning, let's take an example, correct? I want a set of users to be provided some admin access, correct? One way is what I can do is I can add all the 5 users individually in that admin role, correct? And the other way is what I can do is I can group them together and give that group that admin access so that the users within that group would automatically inherit the group properties. So rather than I having to give individual accesses to each and every resources, similar access, what I can do is I can accumulate them in a single container and give that container that access so that users within that container would inherit all the roles assignments of that container. So that container in the Azure Active Directory terms is called groups, correct? So groups is basically logical grouping of users to associate them with some similar access, roles or assignments. Now,
So Nandan, hello, can you hear me?
yes,
Yeah, so all users in that groups will have the same licenses, right?
no, license is not at a group level. License is bought at a tenant level and is associated at a user level. You saw, correct? At user level only, I was able to grant licenses, correct?
Yeah.
Groups is to give him or her access on certain aspects, like certain, let's take an example that within this Active Directory, there was a role that you saw, correct? Global administrator for the data sets, correct? If I want to associate that global administrator, imagine within the organization, if I am the only global administrator, correct? If I met with an accident, correct? I'll be out of organization for a span of 1 to 2 weeks. Should it mean that the entire organization should stay still for 2 weeks? No, correct? So you need to have certain backups for those admin roles, correct?
Yes.
So what I can do is I can have a logical container within that a group, and within that group I can add 2 or 3 users so that all those 3 users would be the administrators. Or let's say that within the organization I have a database, correct? Within that database I need to give some administrator roles to certain set of users, correct? Rather than giving the 3 users individually the same access, I can create a group. I can add the users within that group and give that group that access within the database. Clear?
Yeah, clear.
And as I said, once we come across the Power BI concepts or this Azure concepts this weekend, we'll understand how these groups are being leveraged. Correct? But in layman terminology, I hope this is clear. Did I answer your query, Ramesh?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now, how to create a group? So for that, you can click on new group. Now there are 2 types of groups. One is a security type and another is Microsoft 365. Correct? Now, what does these 2 group types mean? Security type, as the name suggests, provides security, meaning roles, assignments, etc. the example that I provided a couple of minutes back, that is, I need to give certain users Fabric administrator, global administrator access, or some admin access within the database, or some read access within the database. So these are security aspects, correct? So to manage security related aspects, the group is a security type. But there is a Microsoft 365. Now, when you create a Microsoft 365 group, what it does is at the back end, it also creates a Microsoft Teams channel, a SharePoint site associated with that, etc. So it's an entire Microsoft 365 aspect, a group, a SharePoint, a Teams channel, etc. So this is for collaboration aspect as a project group rather than more on the security aspect. Correct? So in most of the data governance and management aspect, we usually use group of type security. But in case, imagine within the organization, I am part of project A, you are part of project B. So for every project, we can have a specific SharePoint site Teams channel created. So for that, you can have a group of type Microsoft 365. So for our use case, we need a security group only, correct? So to be deleted, security, deleted. Now I need to select the owner. What does the owner, what is the responsibility of the owner? So the owner is the one who can add or remove members from that group. And members are the one who would inherit the roles and assignments that are associated at the group. What I mean by that is, so now you all saw that I'm creating a security group of type security with this name, this description, wherein I am the owner and I have added 4 members. And I'm creating this group. Now what this would do is, it would go ahead and create a group to be deleted security. Correct? Now here I can see that it is part of, there is one owner, there are 4 members within that group. It was created on this date. I'll come to this concept of object ID tomorrow once we discuss. Correct? Here you can see
Nandan, what is that one group membership?
where all this group membership is happening. Correct? I'll come to that with respect to once we look at with respect to the app aspect tomorrow. We do take a note of this, Krishna, tomorrow. Correct? Once we discuss on the application aspect, correct? At that time, we'll take a look with respect to group membership aspect. Okay?
Yes.
So we need to take a look with respect to what group memberships are. And then there was another aspect that I forgot. Difference between Azure role assignment and that custom role. Correct? That's when we take a look tomorrow. But now, under the group properties, under owners, I'll be able to see the corresponding owner and the members. And where all the Azure role assignments have been added. Meaning, what Azure role has this group been provided? As of now, it has not been provided anything. Hence, you are able to see nothing. Correct? Now, I'll come to this aspect afterwards. Correct? Members. Now imagine that if I add a group, if I add this group within, let's say, as a project admin, as a Active Directory administrator, correct, the global administrator aspect. correct? Then, as I said, all the members within this group would inherit that role, correct? My question is, check the owner. This is the owner. Is the owner part of this member list? No, correct? My question is, would the owner inherit the role that has been associated to this group? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Yes.
No, has to be
Unfortunately,
explicitly member.
correct. Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The role of the owner within the group is to only add, to update the properties, of course, update the properties of the group, like edit the descriptions, etc. Correct? I can go and update the descriptions, to delete the group, or to add or remove the members from the group. But he or she won't be inheriting the roles and assignments associated with that group. Only the members would be inheriting the corresponding roles and assignments, or the security implication that has been associated with this group. Any queries up till now? I hope this is clear, correct? Only the member inherits the features and functionalities. Users do not, the owner does not inherit. Now, in case if let me take one step back. Let me go to a security DL, which is DataShark's ADF. Can you see only this aspect is there, correct? But now, in case if I go to a Microsoft 365 group, can you see Outlook, SharePoint, Outlook group, SharePoint, etc. gets created, and even a Teams channel.
Just one question on the Microsoft 365. Now, when you're showing these, does that mean that an independent Teams channel has been created and we can
Yes,
start using it?
yes. So if
Okay.
you can see here, correct, a Teams channel, a SharePoint, and an Outlook, everything got created.
Okay.
Hence, we usually avoid M365 security aspect, because it creates unnecessary. In case if your ask is only with respect to security management, it does not make sense to create a SharePoint, a Teams channel, etc. That adds to a maintenance and a storage aspect at an organization level, for
Yeah.
which you have to bear the cost.
Yeah. M365 or security, I think both are they both mail enabled, or only M365 is mail enabled? Security
That
will not be email enabled, right?
no, it can be email enabled as well, depending on your use case.
Okay.
Correct. So we would need a group to be created for the users that we would be creating, correct? Because accordingly, we need to grant some roles and access to that users. So hence the aspect of groups. Now, there are certain group properties that can be created as of now. Okay, for today, I'll say this is sufficient with respect to the groups, correct? Tomorrow, I'll provide some advanced aspect of groups. And while creating the user, you saw certain properties, correct? That had kept blank, like job description, location, etc. Correct? So why do we have that features? Correct? And how can group be added in an automated way? Dynamic membership. that we will discuss in tomorrow's session. Correct? Because today we have covered too many aspects, right? From licensing to users to external users, etc. So, any queries on today's session up till now?
Then yesterday you had asked one thing to keep a note, that checkbox. I think when you were changing that directory, there was a checkbox. I think it was there. You said you will discuss it later, but asked us to remind.
So that's not for today. That's when we
Okay.
take a look with respect to applications and other aspects.
That
Access
was
aspect.
with respect to changing directory, right? That checkbox was there, one checkbox.
Yes.
Okay.
That you would be covering tomorrow or day after tomorrow, depending on the
Okay.
timelines.
Got it.
So team, any other queries?
So Nandan, new user